Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Sid Meier's Civilization 5 for PC and Mac. Now if you've seen my Civilization 4 review, you know that I really didn't like that game at all. Even though the Beyond the Sword expansion is a phenomenal expansion pack, it still didn't do a heck of a lot to alleviate the major problems that were prevalent in Civ 4 with its ridiculously over-complex mechanics, to the point where it just didn't make a lot of sense. You would end up losing money and you have no idea why. All sorts of major issues with the gameplay, and then of course the Gamebryo engine sucking, and the interface being convoluted and just a mess. But in Civ 5 they took a pretty different approach, and when I played the demo, if you've seen my thoughts on, I wasn't that impressed with it. But then I eventually got the full game when it was on sale, and so I actually got to experience the full game as opposed to just a small snippet of it. And to be honest with you, the demo is an extremely bad representation of the full game. Now in the visual department, Civ 5 is definitely an improvement over Civ 4, but I've noticed that in spite of having better shader effects, better water effects, the character modeling being better, the environments looking better, textures being higher res and all that, in spite of all that, it actually has a lot more problems with glitches. Terrain will randomly glitch out and turn into basically like white and red checkered tiles. It's really weird looking. I don't know what the problem is there. I don't know whether it's just my computer or whether I've encountered some really random, hard-to-find glitch or something, but it seems to have a lot more graphic glitches than Civ 4, and it gets to the detriment of play, because those glitches appear, and then you can't see what you're doing, because they start flashing textures all over the place, and it's a mess. But if the glitches aren't happening, the game looks pretty good, and I've got it on the maximum detail I can have it in DirectX 9. I don't know how it looks in DirectX 11, but I can't imagine it looks much better than this. They do have anti-aliasing in DirectX 11, but as it stands, it looks pretty good. It's definitely subpar compared to most 3D games these days. Now, the sound design in general is about the same as Civ 4, only they've changed up quite a bit in a few departments. Sound effects still do their job, and that's about it. There's nothing really noteworthy about them. The music is a drastic change from the previous two Civ games in that it's not great. The music in Civ 3 and Civ 4 is extremely memorable, especially the Civ 4 menu theme and the stuff from later on in the game in Civ 3. But they don't use that music anymore. Instead, it's all pretty much generic empire-building strategy game stuff. And it's not bad music by itself. It just doesn't seem to fit the game very well. It's all kind of atmospheric. It's not upbeat. It's not really... it doesn't really get noticed that much. It's just kind of there, and you just occasionally hear something, and it's like, whatever. But the one thing that really has a massive detriment on this game, in terms of sound design, is the voice acting. It's horrible. If you're talking about the leaders, when you go to talk to the leaders for diplomacy and such, they will talk to you, and they will speak their own languages, and the accents are horrendous. The way they speak is really stilted. It doesn't sound natural at all. It's really, really awful. And I don't know why they did that. It doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense to me. I mean, I can understand having voiced leaders, and I can understand having them speak their own languages, but if you're going to do that, get native speakers to do it. Get them to speak naturally. Don't sit there and get something that sounds really fake, and that's what the voice acting in Civ 5 sounds like. But really the biggest change between Civ 4 and 5 is the gameplay itself. The first thing you'll notice is this is a hex-based tile system instead of a square-based tile system that was used in all of the previous Civ games. And I know a lot of people really prefer the hex system. I don't really know why, because the square-based system worked perfectly fine in Civ 4 and before. It was other things that brought Civ 4 down. But really, it didn't change the gameplay all that much. I mean, yes, you have more angles to move your units with now, but it doesn't really change the gameplay that much. It's better for combat, though. I mean, you can get better unit positioning with the hex system, but that's about it. I guess that's what people really went crazy for with that. Speaking of combat, they did retool it very considerably. If you have a technological advantage over your enemies, you will now pretty much always beat your enemy, which is really nice. In previous Civ games, you could have tanks and they would be beaten by Stone Age warriors. It didn't make any sense at all. It was just the result of certain calculations or certain rolls of the dice, basically, because that was what it was. It was basically a roll of the dice. Whereas in this one, it's basically if your unit is more powerful than the other unit, they're probably going to win, unless that other unit has a lot of different bonuses available to it. And in addition, they've also given ranged units like archers or crossbowmen the ability to fire at a distance. They can actually fire up to two tiles away from them, depending on what position they're in, where the enemy is, that sort of thing. And the enemy can't retaliate if they do that. And it's pretty interesting to do that, because that also means that archers will have a range strength and a sort of a melee strength, I guess is what you call it. But their melee strength is just massively weaker than their range strength. So if they get attacked by a melee unit that's fairly strong, they're going to get annihilated. So it actually provokes more tactics using, especially since you can't actually use stacks anymore. You can stack non-combat unit with a combat unit, like say a settler with a rifleman or something for defense, but you can't actually stack multiple units of the same general type. You can't stack in any sort of artillery or any sort of just unit in general that's a combatant with each other, and you can't stack, say, a worker and a settler together for some odd reason. I don't know why you can do that. Or maybe you can. I think you can stack as many non-combat units as you want, but you can't stack any combat units. And so it does allow you to do more tactical battles this time, instead of just relying on your stacks of units to pound the enemy into submission eventually. In addition, certain units have advantages against other types of units, like, say, pikemen have advantages against cavalry of all sorts. And so that's actually kind of nice, too. It also plays into more tactical element. The interface has been retooled so that instead of Civ 4's ridiculously confusing system of menus and all sorts of that was just extremely hard to figure out, Civ 5's interface is extremely easy to navigate and use. It just looks terrible. It's really, really unpleasing to the eye. It just looks awful. But it's extremely functional, extremely easy to use, extremely easy to navigate. And so that's really the main thing here. That's really impressive to me. I mean, while I don't like the way it looks, I can still just get right past that and play the game and just have fun playing the game itself. Anyway, really the gameplay is basically the same as the other Civ games, though. It's still that empire building, build cities, build improvements within the cities, get your production up, get your wealth production up, all that stuff. The thing is, I noticed it's easier to do that now. And I don't know whether it's just me being a veteran Civ player and knowing what I'm doing, or whether the game itself is actually made a lot easier. But I could kick the living crap out of the other civilizations pretty early on. I mean, then again, I was playing a very technologically savvy civilization. But it was really weird to go in that, because in previous Civ games, you had an extremely hard time wiping the other Civs out, except maybe in Civ 4 if you knew what you were doing. But it was really up to chance. This time, if you get that technological advantage, you're probably going to win, and that's a good thing, because it gives you incentive to really get your technology production up and really try to keep the playing field even, which is a good thing. In Civ 3, if you could get away with it, you would be basically 2 ages ahead of everybody else, and you would still have trouble beating the enemy. But in this one, you can be 2 ages ahead, and you will wipe the floor with everybody else. It's really impressive. But it's almost too easy sometimes. It feels like they really tried to make it newbie-friendly, and they did do that. It is pretty easy to pick up and play. I mean, then again, I am a veteran Civ player, but still. it's easy to understand. The game explains things really well, and that's a good thing. At the same time, it lost a lot of the complexity that was from the previous Civ games, including stuff I even liked about Civ 4. There's no espionage. I mean, that wasn't in Civ 4 to begin with either, but there's no espionage. There's fewer civilizations, and they don't have the leader system anymore, so you only get one leader per Civ. There's no traits for that anymore. They changed the civic system to a social policy system, and it works pretty well, actually. You have to spend culture points to get them, and you gradually produce more culture over time, obviously. But these social policies actually do affect your gameplay. So they basically take the place of the civic system and the government systems from the previous Civ games. And it works pretty well. I was very pleasantly surprised by that. I thought it was going to be kind of overpowering, but it really isn't. It just really does help your civilization progress the way you want it to progress, as opposed to just working with one very specific set of things. Anyway, they still have the randomized maps and everything. One thing I didn't like about this was the Play Now feature, where it's literally just you click the button and it auto-configures everything. You don't get to choose anything. You don't even get to choose what civilization you play. So I accidentally did that the first time, and I was like, well, what is this crap? So I went in and have to manually set up everything again, because that's what I like doing. But I guess that option's there for newbies. And that's the impression I got from this. It's very newbie-friendly, but it still loses a lot of the complexity that was nice about the previous Civ games. And I hope they add that back in there later with maybe an expansion pack or some extra DLC. I mean, they've really pushing the DLC thing on this. It's pretty ridiculous. But it's kind of nice to actually have a Civ game that actually plays like a Civ game this time around, as opposed to just this over-complex madness that was Civ 4. So overall, I did quite like Civ 5. The thing is, I didn't quite like it as much as the previous games in the series, but it is still really solid. I give it a 3.5 out of 5. Thanks for watching.